All right, today we're grabbing our legal magnifying glass and diving deep into anti-corruption law. We're going to skip the headlines and go straight to the source, the actual statutes that define what corruption is, who's on the hook, and what the real consequences are. Let's get into it. It's the classic question, right? And it really gets to the heart of the whole issue. From a legal perspective, the answer isn't just a feeling or a guess, it's written down in black and white. There's a very specific line the law draws, and that's exactly what we're here to figure out.
So here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the absolute core concept, this thing called undue advantage. Then we'll look at the official who takes the bribe, and, of course, the person who pays it. After that, we'll see what happens when companies get involved, look at some other related crimes, and finally, we'll get to the consequences, the punishments.
To really get a handle on bribery law, you have to start with the single most important piece of the puzzle. It's a phrase that underpins almost every offense: undue advantage. Now look how broad this term is. That's completely intentional. The lawmakers didn't just say money because they knew corruption is more creative than that. Undue advantage is a huge net designed to catch anything of value: a fancy dinner, a job for your kid, you name it. Anything an official has no legal right to. This wide definition is what gives the law its power. And check this out. This is a crucial point. Under the law, the crime is basically complete the moment the official asks for it. It doesn't matter if the bribe is ever paid or if the favor is ever done. The act of simply trying to get the bribe, that itself is the crime. The intent is what matters. Okay, so let's apply this idea to the first major player in any bribery case, the public servant, the official on the take. The law is super specific about what they have to do to be guilty. So you see, it's all about the connection, the link between that undue advantage and their official job. The crime happens when an official takes a benefit in order to misuse their position. That could mean doing something they shouldn't, or maybe even more importantly, not doing something they're supposed to do. It even covers getting a reward after the dirty deed is done. The law itself gives us this perfect real-world example. The official isn't even threatening to deny the application. He's just demanding extra cash to do the job he's already paid to do. That simple act of asking for something he's not entitled to, well, that's a textbook violation right there.
Of course, a bribe isn't a solo performance. The law is just as focused on the other side of the transaction, the person or the company that's actually offering up the cash or the favor.
Look at this comparison. It's basically a mirror image. Section 8, which covers the giver, is the flip side of Section 7 for the taker. One person gives something to induce an improper action, and the other person accepts it intending to perform that improper action. They are two separate crimes, and both parties are on the hook. And again, the statute lays it out plain and simple for the bribe giver. This person isn't just being generous. They're actively paying to rig the system, to jump the line and get an unfair edge. That is exactly the kind of behavior Section 8 is there to stop. Now, this is a really critical protection for ordinary people. The law gets that sometimes you're not offering a bribe, you're being shaken down. You're being forced to pay to get something you have a right to. If that happens, you're in the clear. But there's a catch. You have to report it to the authorities, and you only have 7 days to do it. The clock is ticking. So far, we've talked about individuals, but the law goes bigger. Commercial organizations, companies, can absolutely be found guilty of corruption when it's done on their behalf. So how does a whole company get charged? The law has a clear 3-step test. First, an associated person, and that's a really broad term, it could be an employee, an agent, anyone working for them, offers a bribe. Second, the whole point of that bribe has to be to get or keep some kind of business advantage for the company. If you can prove those things, the company itself is in legal trouble. Now this right here is probably the most important part of the law for any business. It's basically an escape hatch. A company can actually get off the hook if it can prove it had solid compliance programs in place. Real, adequate procedures designed to stop this from happening. It's a massive incentive for companies to take this stuff seriously before they get in trouble. And you better believe the law doesn't let the people at the top just hide behind the company name. Section 10 lets the prosecutors pierce the corporate veil. What that means is if a bribery scheme happened with the consent or even the quiet approval of the leadership, those individuals, directors, managers, you name it, can be charged personally and face real jail time. Okay, so the law covers the classic A to B bribe, but it also goes after other kinds of official corruption. And this is where we get into something called criminal misconduct. So, criminal misconduct is basically two big things. First, there's the obvious one, straight up theft or embezzlement. An official stealing property they're supposed to be in charge of. But the second one, illicit enrichment, is way more interesting. This one targets officials who somehow end up with a ton of money or assets that just don't match their salary. Now, from a legal standpoint, this is a powerhouse provision. It flips the script. Usually, the prosecution has to prove everything. But here, if a prosecutor can just show that an official's lifestyle and assets are way out of line with their legal income, the law presumes they got it illegally. The burden of proof then shifts to the official to explain where all that wealth came from.
So, what happens when the gavel falls and someone is found guilty? Well, the penalties and the law are no joke. They are designed to be a serious deterrent.
Just look at how these penalties are structured. Giving or taking a bribe can get you up to 7 years. But notice how it gets steeper. Criminal misconduct is seen as a deeper betrayal, and that jumps up to a maximum of 10 years. And if you're a repeat offender, the court has to give you at least 5 years. The law is clearly sending a message. 10 years. Let that sink in for a second. For the most serious kinds of corruption by public officials, we're talking about a decade behind bars. That is a very, very serious consequence. So let's wrap this up with the key things to remember. First, it's a two-way street. The law goes after both sides of the bribe. Second, just asking for a bribe is enough to land you in hot water. Third, for companies, having a good compliance program isn't just good practice, it's your main legal shield. And finally, public officials can't just get rich without explanation. The law can hold them accountable for that too.
We've seen what the law says on paper. It's detailed, it's tough, and it's pretty clear. But it leaves us with one last thought. When the rules are this defined, the real challenge isn't knowing the law, it's proving the case. In the messy reality of the real world, with all its gray areas, how do you actually draw that line? That's the question that lawyers, judges, and investigators wrestle with every single day.